We'll move now to public hearing item number 8.2. Consider adopting ordinance number 22.02, approving a request of John Jeffrey for a specific use permit to operate a one-guest, unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed as 635 East Bridge Street, supplemental-2021-2027. Do you have...
So we'll just turn it over to Kara again for staff report. This has been through the Planning and Zoning Commission, so.
Thank you. This site is shown in teal on the slide here with the subject property note. It has lake frontage and is off of Bridge Street. The Bridge Street turns and goes north. That is private street there. The request is for a one-guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast, and this is the first time use for this property. The site features a single-family dwelling and provides 2 parking spaces satisfying the parking requirements for this proposed use. The site is also located in the Historic Compatibility Overlay District. However, there are no alterations proposed to the structure, therefore no Historic Preservation Commission required review. This slide shows the parking areas. Again, provides adequate parking for the proposed use. On December 9th, the city staff mailed 14 notices to all property owners within a 200-foot distance of the request, and there were no notices in favor and one notice in opposition to the request. Multiple property owners spoke in opposition to the request at the December 20th P&Z public hearing. So public notice had been satisfied in addition to that statement. This slide shows surrounding B&B locations. We're showing this yellow line, halo if you will, at a distance of 600 feet from the subject property. And in this area across the street generally is an existing bed and breakfast. Those are shown in the red outlines. Those are unhosted. And in the blue outline shown is a hosted bed and breakfast all along Bridge Street. On December 20th, try that again. There we go. On December 20th, the item was recommended for denial by the P&Z due to lack of a majority vote for the motion to recommend approval. There were 3 in favor and 4 against. As such, this request in front of council requires a supermajority of 3/4 vote by the City Council to approve. And your voting options are to approve, subject to the standard SUP condition, or to deny the request. Thank you.
City Council is in open session. All council people are still here. So we will now go into the public hearing. And I have a number of people who have signed up for the public hearing. Ms. Amy Dwight.
Good evening. My name's Amy Dwight. I live at 405 Counts Alley, just a few blocks away from the subject property. And I'm here this evening to ask you to please uphold the recommendation of the P&Z Commission to deny this permit application. In my opinion, at issue is the hollowing out of our neighborhoods through the special use permit process, which allows homes in our historically residential neighborhoods to be converted to transient housing for out-of-town guests. This process fundamentally changes the character of our neighborhoods. Houses which were previously home to full-time residents of our community now sit empty 80 to 90% of the time. When someone is there, it's someone different every time. Someone who, in all likelihood, has no ties or involvement in our community other than a weekend visit. While short-term guests certainly spend money in our shops and restaurants, they do not contribute to other aspects of our community that those of us who live here do. They're not involved in our schools, churches, senior centers, food pantries, and the myriad of other activities and organizations that are woven into our lives. In previous meetings, much attention has been paid to the upstanding character of the people requesting the specific use permits and as to whether there are noise complaints from other unhosted properties. We appreciate good character and out-of-town guests that aren't too loud, but there's more to it than that. I think it is important to take a step back, look at the big picture, and consider all of the impacts that occur when historically residential neighborhoods of single-family homes are converted to commercial property that sits vacant most of the time. The issue of property rights is another topic brought up in this discussion. We all have a tendency to get very vocal about our rights, often trampling on the rights of our fellow citizens and neighbors in the process. I would like to think that the rights of those of us who bought homes in our historic and historically residential neighborhoods in order to live here full-time carry at least as much weight as those seeking to fundamentally change its character. We would like our neighborhood to stay just that, a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. William Dwight?
Good evening. My name is William Dwight. I live at 405 Counts Alley, right over here, a couple of blocks from here. I'd like to say at the outset, I am not against growth. I am not against change. I'm not against people making a living. What I am against, however, is unmanaged, unbridled growth and change. I've lived long enough to see all kinds of change in my life, and it happens. We can't get away from it. It's going to happen. But I think it can be managed in such a way that the people that are affected are affected as little as possible. Granbury's got a lot of wonderful things to it that draws a lot of people here, for a lot of tourists, but there's also a lot of people that want to move to this town. We deliberately made a choice to move to the downtown area because of all the amenities and all the ambiance of living near a city center like this has. We love the restaurants. We love just get out and walk the neighborhood. We deliberately chose a neighborhood with single-family homes in it, with no businesses, no bed and breakfast, single-family homes with families living there. Everybody in my neighborhood participates in this city and county's activities. We all vote. We participate in political affairs. We go to the churches. We support the schools. We support all the businesses that we can here. The people that come to visit contribute to some of those things too. They do go to the restaurants, they go to the Granbury Opera and the Granbury Live and all that, but every day they do not do that. We do it every single day that we live here. The people that come to the bed and breakfast, number one, they're not there very often. Those places, in my experience, are empty probably 3/4 of the time. Having empty buildings sitting in the middle of a single-family residential neighborhood, to me, is detrimental to the quality of the neighborhood and to all the things that bring people to this area to live, not to visit, but to live. Lost my train of thought. In the last few months, we've had 3 businesses try to open in our neighborhood, bed and breakfast, and we've watched the other ones in the neighborhood that are already there. They're not occupied a good part of the time, and when they're there, those people do not participate in all the things I just delineated to you. I think that the neighborhoods contribute more to the quality of life in this town than any businesses do, and that we need to have the families, the single-family homes, the residential neighborhoods to preserve the ambiance this city has. I would urge you to deny this request for a B&B at this location, and I would also ask that you all consider some kind of a long-term plan for managing this type of growth throughout the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peter Garland?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. On East Bridge Street, from where Stockton Street crosses East Bridge Street to the end of Bridge Street, at the end of that yellow line that Kira showed on the map, there are 10 lots dedicated to bed and breakfasts, plus the old, the dollhouse, which makes it 11 houses that are theoretically single-family residential lots, but they're all either bed and breakfast or a museum. There are only 7 lots left in that area that are still residential. I live at 511 East Bridge Street. And across the street from me is the Hotel Lucy. Now, the Hotel Lucy is not that big of a deal noise-wise. It is managed fairly well, but it is residential, it was single-family residential. And how many houses in this city are we going to make bed and breakfast or hotels? If we go one at a time, it's sort of like how you boil a frog, you know, you just put the frog in a nice pan of water, turn the heat up, and very slowly he's boiled. So I would like to, as one of the previous speakers spoke about, is how do we manage this? Do we just take the next 7 houses that are not bed and breakfasts and make them all? It seems like that should be a zoning issue. Back in the around 1999 or 2000, they rezoned the city. And the area on the south side of East Bridge Street was commercial. The neighbors and the city manager and the mayor, we all worked together to get it rezoned to residential. But now it's basically all just Hotel Lucy and another bed and breakfast. One bed and breakfast is kind of cute. When Shelby Miller opened up her little bed and breakfast down there at the end of East Bridge Street, it was cute, quaint, you know, it's very nice. But now we got 11 of them over there if you open up this one. So I would like to ask you to deny this one and come up with some plan to kind of limit the number of bed and breakfasts that you allow in a block or in a length of street or something like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Mr. Wayne Mills.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Mills, and I live at 629 East Bridge Street. I'm in that house at the very end of Bridge Street where it dead ends at. And I've watched over the last several years as improvements to East Bridge Street have happened, and I'm, along with many others in the community, we're very glad to see the improvements that were made there. And aesthetically looking at it, when you go down there, it looks much nicer than what it used to look. But there's something beyond the aesthetics in my neighborhood. And what's missing now is if you walk from my house down the road 1,000 feet, half of those buildings in that location are no longer single-family units. And what I experienced there is I experienced the loss of neighbors. My neighborhood doesn't have neighbors in it anymore, and that's not why I moved to Granbury. That's not why I came here. That's not what drew me here. What drew me here is the feeling of this community. Now, we live in an area that was built before there were HOAs and deed restrictions and all of those things in place to keep this type of activity from going on within the areas. And so now, as a member of this community, both the Planning and Zoning Commission as well as this council, is my opportunity to please ask that we put something in place, that we have something that helps to limit the future growth of the bed and breakfast. Help me keep my neighborhood full of neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Joyce Dorsey.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me this opportunity. My name is Joyce Dorsey. I live at 312 Turner Circle. I'm probably 20 feet outside of the 200 feet. Like Wayne and the others have said, our little neighborhood is not going to be a neighborhood much longer because we're reaching a tipping point. I'm one of the few natives of Granbury and Hood County that still exist, and I love everything that's happened in our city. I love the growth. I was here long before the lake, and everything that has changed, everything that has happened over the 69 years of my life just makes me so proud of this town. But I think that we're getting to a point about many things, about much of the change, is that we need to maintain balance. And as everything new comes in to be approved, it is exciting. We love Hotel Lucy. It's, as Wayne said, it's improved the aesthetic up and down the street. But as more and more bed and breakfast are approved in our little area, we're not going to be a neighborhood anymore. So we just ask that it seems like one at a time to the planning and zoning and to you folks when you approve these. But when you looked at the map a while ago, you see that there are very, very few houses. I believe someone said 7 residential lots still left. And so we would very much appreciate you considering how we can balance this and how we can make a very exciting and vibrant community, maintain that small town neighborhood atmosphere that those of us who live here and love it want to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorsey. Ms. Deborah Jeffrey.
My name's Deborah Jeffrey, and I have been coming to Granbury to visit on and off since probably my parents moved to Granbury, which was, they built the house in, I guess, around 1978 or so. My mom and my stepdad lived there for several years, and I truly respect, I am one of the owners. I don't know if I mentioned that. My husband and I own the property. And, you know, I truly respect the feelings of all the neighbors here. I do. When my husband and I moved to Plano in 1997 with our son, who was 3 at the time, we kind of went through the same emotions because Plano was starting to grow, and you know, there's a lot of stuff we didn't like about it. I do want to say that we do plan to maintain the property just as well as we have over the past 5 years while it was being rented. We've had the opportunity to meet some really great people here. And our most recent tenant, Carmen Esposito, wrote a letter. Carmen actually rented the house for about a year and decided to buy here, and he bought a nice house. I don't remember the name of the subdivision, but the letter was sent to all of the city council members, and he started a family here. So there's good things about Airbnbs. They're not all bad. They're not just for transients. We plan on really making sure the people that stay there are a good fit for the property in the neighborhood. So that's basically all I had to say. John and I both realize that Granbury is growing. You guys are going through a lot of changes. I mean, we've seen it. We could get down 377 in 5 minutes. And now we sit in traffic, and you know, it's a challenge. But we do love Granbury. We're looking forward to staying here when it's not being rented and getting to know our neighbors, and hopefully they'll come over and see us, and we'd love to meet all of them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. John Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Thanks, Debbie. I'll expand a little bit on what Debbie said. So if I repeat myself, forgive me, but I want to just give a little bit more detail. So Debbie and I own the house, of course, on 635 East Bridge Street. And I just want to give you a little bit of background. This home originally belonged to Debbie's parents. They built it, she says 78, that sounds right. She'd probably know more than I think it was 82, but we've been visiting them on a regular basis since then. So Granbury, in a sense, has become like a second home for us. I mean, we know the city well. as we can, as well as we can for, then they passed away in 2015, so in order for us to keep the house, we want to keep it in our family and give it to our son. We had to rent it to, pay the taxes and the insurance. So at that point, and now we're at a point really where, renting it, people don't take care of it as well. And or with the Airbnb, if you're going to be successful at it, as I'm sure you're aware, it has to be in top-notch condition. So in light of that, I've already installed an irrigation system. The place had grass birds. You couldn't even walk out in there without bleeding, coming back bloody. So I put an irrigation system in. I've contracted with a landscaping company to cut the yard on a regular basis. I've contracted with the lawn fertilizer, lawn doctor, for them to come out and take care of the weeds and such. I plan to have decorative shrubbery around the house, because right now it's just, most of it, around the house there's nothing. There's just a couple of boxwoods. I'm going to have the house painted as well. It's getting 25, 30 years old and needs some painting. It's a log home, and it's going to get ruined. So, all those things are just going to make the house look, and the neighborhood, improve it. So, I see that as a good thing, I would assume. The growth that we heard from the beginning with the visitors coming, they're going to need a place to stay. And, that's what we're aiming to have, an attractive place for people to stay. So when they come here and they go home and tell their friends what it's like at Granbury, they can say what a beautiful place they've stayed in, a nice neighborhood. I also wanted to mention that Hewlett Park, on that map you may have noticed, we are the first street on Bridge Street as soon as you make the turn. And right next to us is the park. So to get to our property, there would be no additional traffic. It's there, it's the first house. So I don't see it changing in any way how the neighborhood is going to, the traffic or congestion in the area at all.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries.
And I guess, so anyway, that's my say, and I hope you'll consider it and approve our application.
Thank you, sir. That's all of the forms I have. Have I missed anyone? It's not unusual. Then I will close this public session. Open for comments, questions?
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Corrigan.
So I know we're going to get to the vote in a minute, but I want to make clear to all the people that are in the neighborhood that we do hear you. We are listening. I'm glad that y'all came and voiced your opinion. To my recollection, and it's not the greatest, this is last meeting when we had another B&B in the same area was the first time that any group of substance, aside from maybe the person next to the potential B&B, has come to council and voiced their opinions. I appreciate you coming. We don't know how you feel unless you come or unless you talk to us individually and voice your opinions. I will say that on this particular application, I don't agree with the vote made by P&Z for a few reasons. One, it's an SUP. They followed all of the parameters and all of the rules that we have in place for those SUPs. And we have them in place for a reason, so that in the event they are not keeping up with the property or abiding by the rules that we have, we rescind that SUP and they can no longer operate as a B&B. So for those reasons, my vote when it comes to that will be to approve this particular SUP request. Now, what I would like to do, and I've talked a little bit about this with our city manager after the last council meeting, is to officially on record request that we have staff look at the ordinance, at the SUP, and the way that we go about approving these. I do agree with you. At some point, it becomes a little much for a neighborhood to have more business type residences there than people actually living there. Unfortunately, we are where we are, and all the rules have been followed. So on this particular application, outside of that, I hear you. I think the rest of the council hears you. I do think there is something that we can do better, and I think that we can implement some different policies and procedures that allow for more balance in this particular subject. So I appreciate you coming, and with that, I will turn it over to anyone else.
Is it you? Mayor, Mr. Rodriguez.
Mayor, I feel the same way. I mean, I think Mr. Dwight said the one key word that I wanted to bring up is long-term plan. Something that the city needs to work on is a long-term plan. Unfortunately, we are at the moment, plan to make a decision about this bed and breakfast. This is a byproduct of what is happening in Granbury, and along with traffic, we're experiencing growth. And sometimes with growth, you experience different things that cities normally wouldn't struggle with, and this is one of those things that we are struggling to find a solution for. So hear me in knowing that the city staff and the city council is going to try to learn what is the balance between having what's the balance of having too many and not too many bed and breakfasts. In the month, if I'm correct, this past year, with all the events that we've had, there was a couple of months that all of our hotels were occupied. There was not a room to be found in the hotel industry. And sometimes with that, you have bed and breakfasts for other people to stay at as an alternative when they want to come to to Granbury. So this is like an alternative way of getting a place to stay other than a hotel, and this is what we're challenged with. Not only traffic, but also growth, also housing, and also bed and breakfasts. And I understand being neighbors in a neighborhood, but I'll have to be honest, other than the immediate neighbors around me, when I say immediate, it's my left, right, and across the street from my house, I don't know much of my other neighbors. And I don't know if you feel the same way. Maybe you're in a smaller community, maybe you're more neighborly, but that's how I feel. Most people don't know their whole entire neighborhood other than the immediate neighbors across the street or next to them. And that's all I have to say on this.
Hold on a minute. Ms. Reiner?
Mayor, thank you. Ms. Dorsey used my favorite word, balance. I think you guys have probably heard me say that a million times. This is truly a tough one, and I agree with Mr. Corrigan. This is probably the most opposition in addition to the last one that we experienced. Where do we balance property rights with the tourism industry and the lack of hotel rooms? This is a tough decision to make for all of us. I think that you probably can see that on our faces. I also agree. We're just reiterating, I think, things that we're all saying. There definitely needs to be a plan in place, what that looks like in the future. You know, that's going to have to be a discussion. I do truly appreciate everybody that came out here. This is, I guess, the hot box right now with what's going on in our tourism industry here, trying to figure out what to do in the future and maintain our historic overlay, maintain our historic presence, and still maintain the tourism dollars that come in here and fund things like our roads and other things. So this is really just a comment to the homeowners. Everybody up here that's spoken already is correct. We are listening. I don't know what that looks like for this evening, but we definitely will be looking in the future to figuring out how to move forward with this. So that was it.
Mr. Wadley?
Yeah, I've heard from P&Z, but can staff say for the record why P&Z denied it? Does someone have that information here? Chris?
I was there, but I'd rely on Kara to report that.
Because
Sure.
the audience wouldn't know unless they were at the meeting.
So, sure, so P&Z, they reviewed the case facts that the applicant put forth for the bed and breakfast. They also took the input from the community that came to speak, and they stated some considerations about whether the property would continue to be maintained and would fit in with the community. They also took into consideration some of the comments that were made about continuation of a neighborhood versus a neighborhood of bed and breakfast, if you would distinguish between a neighborhood where there were permanent residents versus visitors on a basis of a continuing or common occurrence.
Okay, I'd heard there was some concern about the way the property was going to be specifically maintained and managed. And I didn't know if the owner wants to address that.
He did that in his presentation. He elaborated tonight.
Okay, but he's in Plano. You're going to manage it from Plano? That's my question.
It's in your email.
Yes, please do. Mr. Jeffries, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yes.
John Jeffrey. We since looked further into having property management companies take care of it, and we've spoken to at least one, and we have to compare a second, and contracted with some software companies to analyze what needs to be done. But to answer your question directly, we're going to have it property managed professionally. It's not what we do.
Thank you. Mr. Bell?
Mr. Mayor, I went back and watched the P&Z meeting from 12/20, and the comments that were made were, I think, very accurate. There were some concerns, I believe, from some of the commissioners regarding maintenance. Subsequent to that, the document that you provided with the 8 points on there, I think detailed out, for me anyway, your plan about maintaining and making sure the property is in good condition. I also discussed with our city manager, some of the concerns that we continue to hear about bed and breakfast after sitting on P&Z for some years. They're not new, but they certainly ramped up, I think, over time. We've looked at some other sister cities in terms of things that they do and how they might be addressing some of these. So we're not alone with some of the influx of B&Bs and some of the challenges that our other cities are faced with this same topic. So I think some work has already started to how we address this, and I think what I heard tonight, kind of reiterated in my mind what I've been thinking about is how do we come up with a balanced approach, and how do we come up with some long-term range planning of how we're going to address these in the future. But obviously for tonight, we've got a decision to make with the information that we have on hand. Thank you.
Other questions? Can I ask council, if there are things that we should be considering back and forth? I know that we're bouncing against some of the legal things, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, Mayor, I guess I'll get to be the bad guy tonight.
No.
So first of all, I want to comment on P&Z and their recommendation because I watched it and discussed that with them. They actually did a fantastic job. They're checking their boxes, and Mr. Jeffries was unprepared that night, and he was unable to answer some of the questions, and they made a recommendation, as they should, that the SUP be denied. Subsequently, because they did their job, he put together a plan that was submitted to you for consideration, showing you and answering all of the questions that you need answered in order to make an informed decision, right? So I applaud P&Z for what they did on this one. They actually got it right. As far as the short-term rentals, that is not a Granbury issue, that is a statewide issue. And what I would advise anybody who doesn't like that, reach out to your legislature, try to get some laws enacted. Reach out to your courts and have them change the constitutional reading of property rights. There is a lot of litigation going on with this. There are cases out of Austin where the Supreme Court has come back and said, this is not commercial, this is residential, because it's used for residential purposes. There is a case right now out of Arlington. The city of Arlington was sued. They actually put together zones where you could have bed and breakfast, and then all the rest of the city was excluded. That was submitted to the Supreme Court in September of 2021, and we're waiting on a decision. Obviously, that will be guidance for us as to whether or not we can then sit down and create these zones ourselves, or limit certain areas. But as of now, they are considered residential because although, in my opinion, quasi-commercial, they're used for residential purposes. And that's what the court has told us. And until we get back the determination from this Arlington case from the Supreme Court, we won't know if we will be able to actually put in enforceable zones where you can or cannot have bed and breakfast. There are always, although complicated and complex, there are other ways you can do this. You can get your neighborhood together, and although it wouldn't work retroactively, you can get your neighborhood together and petition and update your CNRs to not allow for short-term rentals, those kinds of things, but people are getting creative. I read a case just a couple of days ago after Kira and I talked about this a little bit, where the folks looked at the calendar and said, well, I have all these folks coming in, so they created a lease for 31 days and did a lease with all these folks, even though they were staying different days. Now it's not a short-term rental. How do people are always going to try to get creative. So these are all the hurdles that we have to overcome. In the meantime, you guys have to make it whatever decision you have to make tonight. But just this is something that staff, Mr. Coffin, myself, we've been looking at, thinking about. There's a study underway that the staff is working on. We're going to bring more information to you guys. The big thing right now is just waiting on this court case from the Supreme Court so that you can be fully informed and we can put in place what you guys want to put in place and what the public's asking.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Mr. Kaufman?
I wasn't going to speak on the topic, but I got to tell you, I want y'all to know that we're serious about the restrictions. My son lives in Plano, and he lives in a 3-bedroom home next door to a 5-bedroom home with a swimming pool that is, as long as he's been there, has been a B&B. And me being the city manager that I am, when I was in his backyard, I smelled this marijuana smoke coming across his fence, and so I was a little offended, concerned about my 3 grandchildren. So I came back and looked up the zoning ordinance in Plano and discovered that B&Bs aren't permitted in that particular area. And so I wrote an email to them. My first name is the same as my son's first name, so they don't know where I live, but I gave them my name and acted like I was him on his behalf without him knowing. And I've got an email back that says, yes, it's against our code, but we're not enforcing that at this time. And so that is a huge problem. But it's not just Granbury that's dealing with this struggle. It's the property rights. The last 3 legislative sessions, there's been a bill presented. It hasn't passed, but it would take away a city's authority to do what we actually do. And so you need to talk to your state legislatures and keep the cities to have local control over this issue. Because without your comments and input, we wouldn't be concerned about changing the ordinance because we would think it's working. And so, personally, I don't know of anybody that wants a B&B next door to them. My son's got one, and I don't like it, and that's over in Plano. So, at the same time, it's a property rights issue, it's a legal issue, and we have to observe it. And so, we at least have a mechanism in place. Somebody in the past that said at this dais passed an ordinance that adopted what we have in place, and thank goodness they did that, or it would be crazy. It would be more crazy than what we already have. And so I like what the city attorney is recommending. You as property owners have the right to come together and change your deed restrictions and come together and form an HOA if you want to, or whatever. And you can prohibit those in your neighborhood by an HOA restriction. And the state law hasn't been working to undermine that authority. So that's just some encouragement words that maybe you can look at moving forward. And again, I've sent probably a dozen news articles from across the state of Texas to the council explaining these problems are not localized just in Granbury. It's everywhere. So thank you. And we're listening. We're going to take care of business.
Thank you, sir. A comment that I haven't heard, and actually I heard this when watching Fredericksburg's council meeting last week, which they had short-term rental on the agenda, and they had 38 people sign up to speak, 2 hours. One of the things that was mentioned is that every bed and breakfast short-term rental is a residence that goes off the market. And when you're already in a housing shortage for, affordable housing shortage, each one of these takes a house. You build a house, one of these gets approved, you're at net zero. And we haven't looked at those numbers, but I'm sure we're not at net zero. But there is an impact to the housing market when they come off of the market, the residence market. So there are other questions, comments? Do I hear a motion on item 8.2? Mr. Corrigan?
I'll make a motion to approve item 8.2 with the recommended conditions.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rodriguez. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. No. That's me. 5 ayes, 1 no. Does that count right? Everybody agree? Good. We'll now move to item 8.3. It's also a public hearing. We're considering adopting ordinance number 22.03, approving a request of Sarah Webb for a specific use permit to operate a one-guest suite unhosted bed and breakfast. The property is addressed as 323 South Hannaford Street, SUP 2021-24. Young lady, Kara.
Hannaford, outlined in the blue teal color. It is on the east side of Hannaford. The site zoning is R7 for single family, and that was completed in 2001. It also has historic compatibility overlay district, and the request is for a one guest suite unhosted B&B, and this is the first time use on this property. The slide shows the picture of the home, and that boxed in area demonstrates that the site would have adequate parking. 2 parking spaces are required for this use. While the site is within the historic compatibility overlay district, there is no need for historic preservation review, as the site is not undergoing any physical changes. This slide shows the current zoning and the surrounding zoning. The public notice on December 9th, staff mailed out 24 public notices, and notice was also published in the newspaper. There were, as of this writing of the report, that is, 1 letter received in favor and 1 letter received in opposition to the proposal. This slide shows a 600-foot halo demonstrating the surrounding properties in red boxes that are already approved unhosted bed and breakfasts. Those were approved within the last year. The subject site is shown in that yellow hatched location. The P&Z recommendation on December 20th was for approval by a unanimous 7-0 vote with a standard SUP condition, and your voting options, council, are to approve or to deny. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The council is in open session. Everybody is here. I'm going to now take this into public hearing, and I have Ms. Sarah Webb has signed up to speak.
Good evening. Thank you, City Council, Mayor, and City Manager. My name is Sarah Webb. I live at 3022 Meander Road in Granbury. The property that we're talking about is 323 Hannaford. My husband and I have lived in Granbury for 18 years. We moved here after both of our parents moved here 10 years before us, and we moved here to get married and raise our family here. We are very invested in the community, and this will be, we've looked for a place in Granbury for probably the last 5 years. My parents had to move. My dad got transferred. They moved from Granbury after living here for about 15 years. And but our hope is that they'll be coming back soon. And so we've been looking for a place in Granbury that they could live and retire. They're well past the retirement age, but they're still working. And we want to be able to take care of them. So we've looked for a few years for a place, and nothing has popped up that would be a good fit for them. So when Hannaford popped up, we knew that this could be a place that they could retire that would be close to us where we could take care of them. But in the interim time, we would like to have an unhosted B&B. I'm very familiar with this. This will be our third property. We have 2 other properties that we currently Airbnb that are second homes. So we spend a lot of time there, but in the in-between time, we do Airbnb them. With this property, our hopes would be that our parents would move back here in the next few years. But I'm a realtor. I also have a property management company. So I manage all of our properties myself. I don't pay anybody because I'm licensed to do it. It'd be silly for me to pay somebody. We have over 200 5-star reviews over the last 6 years of doing it. 0 complaints. We also have a very, the properties mean something to me. So for me, this property will eventually be my parents. So the fact, we've already added value. We've added some nicer fencing and some things in the backyard just to kind of up the property in the backyard. But it means something to me to not only have the property look its very best, to be well taken care of, but we've been in Granbury for 18 years, so we know a lot of people. Our neighbors mean something to us. Mr. Crow, who lives directly behind us, has lived there 56 years. And so it means something to us that our neighbors feel valued and taken care of. And we're probably there 4 to 5 times a week, either checking on the property or maintaining the property. So it's not really left there vacant on day's end. So my hope would be that that you guys would approve, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have.
We have no other people that have signed up. If anyone has a question? No? Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm going to go out of public hearing at this point in time. Any comments or questions? None? No comments, no questions? I will call for a motion then.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Wadley.
I make a motion that we approve ordinance 22-03 with the stated conditions.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Vale. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. It's approved 5-1.